Hello, Studio Array is offering another youth talk show. I'm Nino Gelashvili, and today we will talk about the problems of young people living in the country and the regions, and we will talk about their opportunities too. So that's what was discussed last week in Natia. It's a workshop which the MPO, just Alliance just for Civic Progress, promoted. We will see the report about the workshop and we will start our discussion. Challenges in the country, involvement of young people at the local level. That was the name of the workshop that was held in Natia early March. The participants were young people who came from different regions of Georgia. They shared the issues of their own communities and their personal experience. And the challenges before young people were identified. Actually, I learned just a new mechanism, new ideas which I could use in my region. Most important was the first day. We had just a role plays, and I realized how hard it is to make a decision. Not hurting your own idea and hurting your own country. With the trainings, we learned a lot. How to promote the problems, to raise our problems, the problems of young people, and we talked about the solutions to their issues. And it goes without saying that I will use the just acquired knowledge in my community. As the challenges before young people were identified infrastructures issues, lack of initiatives and involvement of young people into the agencies of local self-government. There is always talk about that in the conditions of local democracy development for young people. The space is limited, and those experienced politicians and political groups still occupy these spaces and positions, and they just define the speed of social and political life. But young people feel better what must be changed and what must be done, and how to make modern village or municipality even more modern. Along with those who came from regions, the workshop was also visited by ambitious local young people and recently set up NGO Youth for Highlands. The organization was created 2 months ago with purpose of involving young people into cultural and sports life and promotion of informal education. Our organization is quite motivated, though we were freshly created, but we are working energetically. We are going to conduct thematic trainings, and we are going to set up small movie theaters where young people could have opportunity to see on the large screen educational documentary and other informative films. Also, we want to create environment for kids' development. The workshop in Natia was held at support of Youth Fund of European Council. The participants talked through Skype call with representative of the fund and received answers to their questions of interest. It was very beneficial training. I got information about the Youth Fund of European Council, which would help us to implement and turn our ideas into projects. The facilitator of the workshop is NGO Alliance for Civic Progress. Today we have in our studios the young people from different regions of Georgia. They're part, of course, participated in that workshop, and also we have guests, the facilitators of the workshop, and that's my first question for Nona. Please tell us, why did you decide to hold the workshop for the only those young people who live in the country? Hello. After many years of work which we conducted at different central towns, we realized that involvement was very poor in distant regions and small villages, and that's why we decided to go to a faraway, distant, remote area, Natia, and to take our project there because their involvement was quite poor. In recent years, that I think was stipulated by the low information level of the regions in question, and maybe due to the lack of knowledge what informal education means and what it could bring to such projects to young people. Now let's ask the participants of the workshop. So what experience did you acquire? So maybe one of the participants, please. And did the workshop live up to your expectations? Thank you. First of all, thank you for your invitation. And I am very devoted viewer of your TV programs, and I'm very happy that you devote a lot of time to use problems. So, first of all, Natia was very charming by its beauty, and the workshop. Well, it was very important for me to listen to trainers like Svi and Nona and Nino, and got the exhaustive information what we had to talk about. And I'm sure that in future I will use the acquired knowledge in practice because there are not many opportunities in order to get such knowledge. And I'm very grateful. I'm very happy that I was one of the participants of the workshop. Specifically, what did you get the knowledge about? So, what are the main problems in the regions for you, young people? So, sure, please. First of all, let me thank you for your invitation. And regarding the workshop, we had topics about activities of young people in the regions. So, the projects young people participate in, and what we could do, young people, just for others to activate them and for the progress of our regions and for our own integration and whatnot. So I've got to tell you that I learned a lot from the workshop, from these competent persons, and of course I will use the knowledge in practice. Now let's speak about the specific problems. So what are the problems and issues and the challenges today for young people in regions? I would say that our young people in our region, we belong to just an ordinary vulnerable group. And why? First of all, so we get information always through general media, which quite frequently is not impartial, and but free information on the internet is to a lesser extent available and accessible. So we're speaking about highland regions and villages where there is no access to internet at all. And when we started our activities of issuing grants and we financially support small initiatives, so they often have problems. For example, they say that they will bring documents, just manually written because they have no printer, no internet. Another problem is employment, and I'm not surprised. I'm not reproaching these young people. And the government has no policy what to do with young people living in the region. So, unfortunately, universities were cancelled, and willy-nilly you have to leave the village, and after you get in cities education, you don't want to go back any longer because there's no reason, and there are different problems, and I think other participants will speak about that. Please. So there's no representative because it was a long way to participate in our just studio show, and based on my observation, they were expressed worries that young people have no opportunity to get involved into the decision-making process about their villages. And second important aspect is that there is no infrastructure in terms of development of youth, young people to urge them, to encourage them to stay in the village. For example, it would be just a small youth center or good gym where just good sportive children would grow up. I think you want to extend this topic. Of course, there are a lot of various problems in the village, in the country. And 2013, we just conducted a study, Rebetty and Grammy, and it was school students but we involved young people as well, and so here it was said about the space where young people could get together, just different the sport activities, cultural events, etc. This is a problem through all Georgia. I can't be responsible for all Georgia, but in these villages, these young people, when we asked them to describe their problems, this was one of the problems. But these children, the way they see their just needs, there are other problems that actually just are issues for the whole village. For example, drinking water, irrigation water, I would say. So just to list other problems, would anybody just be willing to input? I'd like to specifically speak about not only just some village, but I'm coming from Brajum, and I always say that we have a big issue in terms of involvement into local self-government and in terms of employment. But I don't want to be populistic. For example, there is some Tsitskishvili Media Center, which always has been involved into social and young people-related problems. And as for this problem, so as I realize, there is centralization in Georgia. Everybody tries to go to Tbilisi, but I have no desire to come to Tbilisi and to use my just intellectual capabilities in Tbilisi. I want to use my intelligence here in my region to be spent in my region, but we don't have a large employment market. This is the issue in regions, and 90% of those who go to big cities, they go there just for a variety of job market and to use their intelligence in big cities. I understand the issue. So what do these people do in order to solve these problems? We will speak about that after the advertisement block. We continue our studio show and we speak about the problems of young people. So what do they do? What do these young people do in order to solve these problems? So in order not to speak in the third person, I will ask you personally, so what do you do in order to solve these problems? Nona, I know that you just represent a very just ambitious organization. Please tell us what are your activities? So civic initiative, we started this year some grant issuing activities, which means that in our region, in the municipality, we just try to financially support initiative groups who want to solve some problems and to create some educational spaces. It was a big joy because a few years ago when we started our activities, nothing of the kind just would be around which would be willing to support us. So what we do is, so it was said that there are no cultural space where young people would exchange their opinions, would learn something, except for their just high schools. I mean, informal education and different topics that interest young people, that we just support this, and our main line is strengthening the local self-government and involvement of young people into these activities. But I think that the challenge for the organization is just economic strengthening and just promotion of young people. We can't do that. Neither can do the states, the government, and employment market is mostly occupied by, let's say, adults and elderly people. Therefore, young people flee the villages, and you see, of course, while just people are hungry, they don't care about culture, and no wonder when one is hungry, just you're not interested in other things but for food. And I think that just funds and state will slowly start to understand that unless people and their villages are stronger, just why the hell should people just stay here? And for example, the program, I think produced in Georgia. I just wonder about the statistics. For example, in my region, this program is used by elderly people who just earlier had small businesses too, but young people have no quotas there. But who would support these young people? But should they be any quotas? There are no limitations. Yes, I also thought about that. But however, if young people just flee the villages because of unemployment, for example, personally, why would I stay? Because it's all over the country, and it's an issue all over the country. Yes, no one limits, but no one actually supports them. So actually, just it's a matter of competition. I often heard that young people complain that there is no cafe, no bar, no cinema in the regions, but it's business and you can't ask government to do that. But why aren't young people interested in doing business, and why aren't they creating some commercial enterprises? Besides, has any one of you ever tried to do some business? George, please. Welcome everybody. First of all, thank you for your invitation. Oh yes, so our colleagues spoke about not very ideal conditions for young people to start commercial activities. But however, I think that if there is a will and if there is a goal, I think based on your opportunities, you could quickly obtain your goal. And a clear example is personally, I and a few friends of mine from Agrarian University, we just obtained funding from an NGO, and we started up agricultural project. At this stage, we offer farmers, small farmers, just mobile, just vet services. Now, we have just an elderly vet and one just booster, and we just own just an off-road car, and with that we offer small farmers vet services. Project has been successful, more or less. There are some changes, but all in all, just we managed to involve young people and to start these activities, and hopefully just we will have more successful, and we will represent one of the examples of the conception. If there is will, I think you should do that. So only you young people are just engaged in that. Yes, I am the one, and other two students from Agrarian University. We jointly had this idea, then just turned it into business and contacted NGO that issued a grant. One of the priorities was agricultural business, and they liked the idea, they approved of the idea, and we also just participated in financially, but we just brought in our resources, and as mentioned, at this stage, the business so far has been successful. Thank you. And the importance of the state was mentioned by Nona, and now here we have the guest and representative of the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs. So, question is, what does government do to support the young people in the region? Let me welcome everybody and thank you for the invitation to your studio show, and for just allowing me to speak publicly. It's very nice that public space is allocated for young people to speak about their problems and for the issues that are raised here. Well, there have been a few questions, and unfortunately I can't react to all of that due to the just limitations of time, but we always try to offer young people some public space to cooperate with government, and our ministry takes this responsibility to be a mediator or broker through to other ministries, and as the management of youth people is not only the responsibility of our ministry, this is now just subject to very hard structural dialogue where involved parties are different, establishments from governmental and of course business sector and NGO sector. As for the problems just raised here, I want to point out the entrepreneurship, and the ministry just tries to interfere with this area. We finance social entrepreneurship projects through the Fund of Youth Development at our ministry, and we have so far financed only just social entrepreneurship projects, 15 of them. There have been very successful examples, so you can address just to fill up the application. It's not very difficult form, and especially those vulnerable groups living in highland regions where the infrastructure is not quite developed. So such young people could address, and by all means we will try to consider their political ideas. They are just ideas. Do you have any budgets? This year our budget, to be spent on projects is 1 million laris. And within the scope of 1 million lari, we can finance not only just the social entrepreneurship, but informal education related projects. These programs which contribute to transition from just education, from school education to informal education. Also projects that are oriented on the healthy way of life. But some specific budget, yes, limitation is 25,000 laris is upper limit, but however, in specific cases, we could just increase, up to 30,000 laris if the project, would bring very just high values and would substantially contribute to the living conditions and welfare of young people. So we could just raise the upper limit at that. So do you have any priorities, just, the directions where you just fund these projects? Yes, it's social entrepreneurship, it's informal education, and, transition from education into employment, the healthy way of life. So I think that's all about it. Thank you. So I think we will speak about other projects as well, but meanwhile I want to ask young people, so have you ever addressed this ministry just in order to gain support for your just initiatives? Do you have any experience of the kind? Thank you very much. So our organization 4 times already has applied, but we couldn't just persuade the ministries that our project is quite valuable, and all 4 times just we got no as an answer, but we'll try just 5th time. So our vision is that so groups working in the regions, I think government and the Fund of Development and Youth must be especially supporting such groups. Their answer, just when they just refuse to finance, is that why haven't you just funded the project? Because the project was not quite sustainable. So, but initiative groups and organizations, I think we are kind of, ignoring them. So, because, actually just the government itself just should support its own citizens and not USAID or international organizations. They're international ones and they have their own projects. The state fund should be taking special care of that and should, of course, excuse, some mistakes as well. Apologize, I heard about this budgeting, I think it's good, but what should government and the minister do? Minister must be a lobbyist, very willing lobbyist, because why would government keep and pay to such a big ministry unless ministry just properly raises the questions of young people, issues of young people? So there is a problem, just express problem of how to write projects. And do you have any experience in how this problem can be just solved? We can't also just ask the government to fund the project which has not been written well. Yes, of course. First of all, let me welcome all of you. And one of the issues with the things that young people do not realize that they have power to change, Doesn't matter it's in a community, village, region, or the country as a whole. And regarding the writing projects, I think not many organizations have proper experience of writing projects. We met in Mestia just freshly, just a set up organization which didn't even know which funds it should address to gain financial support for its project. So it's a big issue in the country. I mean, a lack of information. Luckily, I attended your workshop, and there were some elements, some issues about how to write projects, and maybe you would advise, just in terms of writing better projects. I think we can't discuss key points of how to write projects because it would take a long time. So, simply put it, there are a lot of, even in Georgian languages, some guidelines. If you, for example, download the application of Open Georgian, there are some guidelines and some kind of instructions and a methodology how to write projects. However, all funds have their own form of applications, and it should be met. So I'd like to point out one source of financing which funded the project in Mestia and also just contributed to this show too. It's a Youth Fund of European Council, Strasbourg located, and from all countries of European Council receives applications, but they are just worried this year because from Georgia only 4 applications have come. And I would advise young people who speak English or just ask their friends to help and get about 10,000 euros for local projects. But this is about not only about just informal education, but further activities, of course, can be different. So, except for the training, it's in a very nice way, and I think at the end of the show, I think we will just set up the address of the fund. We will speak about the opportunities now. Just it's time for a commercial. The studio Ray is back, and we speak about the challenges and opportunities of young people living in the region. So I'd like to get back to the representative of the ministry and ask a question, one of the projects. So we would like to hear the information about other projects as well. Sure, the fund is not just the only just tool just in the hands of the ministry just to interfere, just to improve and promote the field of young people. We also have the young and youth people and children's development center, which implements the different projects not only in Tbilisi, in regions as well. On top of that, there are just programs within the scope of the ministry that also are oriented and targeted on the regions. The programs are of different kind. It could be divided into several directions, but our main targeted groups, first of all, vulnerable groups, and with this groups in question, there have been some works going on, so they could write some projects, so maybe improve some, competence of informal education. It could be sport activities, healthy way of living, healthy lifestyle. Promote this lifestyle among young people, whatnot. So I wouldn't like to list the specific projects. Now we have just around 50, 60 this various kinds of programs and projects, and every program has its own target group. You could obtain the information just in question at the website of the center and of the ministry as well. The main niche of the ministry I'd like to underscore, it's not just making programs, specific implementation, specific programs. Our goal is to creates a right atmosphere and environment in the country for NGO sector and all other just stakeholders to implement in favorable conditions, supportive conditions, those projects that are oriented on improving the life and well-being of young people. Therefore, we have a document, created for youth people, attached with the action plan, which all governmental establishment use as a guideline. So, and I'd like to underscore that there's a 5-year plan, and of course we could bring some amendments. Not any document of strategic importance, just is approved without cooperation of NGO. They're actively involved with this kind of drawing up of documents and discussions. I think those who sit here just would not quite be willing to share that, so we can hear different opinions. We simply did not know that there was some action plan a few years ago. Just we double-checked the ministry. Because it's a ministry was changed, so it's a little just chaotic, just nebulous, and just ambiguous environment. Of course, there is nice, and the document actually we have defined, the values, and ministry has been working for 4 years. But maybe I failed to find it. Maybe our organization was not involved. However, there are representatives of the ministry here, and we have some kind of Q&A session, and otherwise the same could be said about the same establishment, any establishment, and of course just to let young people to get integrated at all levels. So the poll 2015 illustrated that 98% of young people have never participated in the development of support of the villages, which means that every village has some money, but 90-80% of young people don't participate. We are not speaking about my reasons as well. Thank you that you are speaking about that, because you just raised this up, because somehow there is notion that young people should only do, all they have to do is just fun, entertainment, some movie, bars, and often they are refused to participate in village matters. Do you have any information on that score? If you have, please share. And I'd like to tell you about our case, about our region. I come from Marneuli, and there are a few NGOs that serve young people, but unfortunately there are no initiatives yet from young people. There are some projects, a lot of projects, plenty of projects that contribute to young people to progress. However, there are no initiatives just on behalf of the young people in terms of integration. And there is an organization, Youth Bank, that every year just announces issuing of small grants, but very few percentage of young people who can write the projects and participate. I am myself a member of Youth Center of Marneuli, and we write some projects, and now just we are implementing advocacy programs, but still activity level is very low of young people. So please welcome everybody. I represent organization SIQA that is working economically very just ambitiously, energetically. Well, the issues that were here, of course, I totally share and agree with, but I can see here the main problems which has been just raised by our guests. Main problem is that young people have no idea what to do, and therefore they have no just wish to do anything. They're not willing. So we just have been working very actively and ambitiously in terms of civil and education, and we go just to every village. We meet students and tell them why it is worth doing something and develop yourself. So this is very important when we talk about and complain that there is no market, there is no just kindergartens and gardens. So we just teach them, okay? So what would they like their environment to be? The main principle is that not to wait for someone else to solve our issues. We have to try to knock on every door and then to demand that we have right to do that, and it's your obligation to do that. We have a lot of issues when young people, undergraduates, solve a lot of issues of the village through cooperation with local government and business. This is the main problem. When we speak about just unemployment, of course, it's a problem, and there is no argument about that. But most important is that not everyone can be a professor. We Georgians, we all just want to be big shots, of course, in speech marks and professor speech marks. But main thing is that just we should illustrate just wherever we have an opportunity to do something, you should be motivated and encouraged to do that. That's what our organization is trying to get across and to teach young people. So that's what we are trying to get across by our show. Please, would you add something? I'd like to specify just your question about the ministry, and I'd like to just underscore just one problem, just volunteer of Georgia, which was very timely step, which just envisaged on the voluntary basis in involvement of young people. And I'd like as an advice to give to the ministry. A lot of young people just were involved in the solving of local issues, and of course, low level of information. I'd like to underscore. It would be very good if representatives of ministry and NGOs would go to those areas and raise awareness, because many people simply don't know what to do. So in this case, the organization which took us to Mestia just completely, just perfectly specified to us what we are capable to do. So these projects must be also just supported by government and NGOs as well. And but of course, the most important link is society, for which I think we should do whatever we can do. Thank you. I think our program is almost just over, and I'd like to ask everyone just if you have something which you have not been able to express. So, to make a long story short, the questions and answers were so fast that I just could not put in anything. So one thing is that, so when a village, makes a decision, it's made by their parents, friends, whatnot. So as if it looks very simple to be involved, But, simply put it, I'd like to just point out a few just aspects. So one project, it is, just a national just study of young people. Of course, a lot of people have been just pointed out, but about involvement, when young people were asked so whether they have a right to be involved in the decision making for the village, 60, 70, 80% said no. I think it would be higher, but as for the involvement in decision making, it happened to be that Tbilisi is one of the lowest, and I think numbers 2 ranked Samangrela. So Tbilisi is not the best place in that respect. And one thing, shortly, so here are just NGOs and the government. For example, I also come from a region, and if some young just one wants to write and implement the project, we have just relatively more experience, and I would be very willing to help if anyone just wants to do a thing like that. Thank you very much, George. Maybe you, and I think we are going to be wrap up. Yes, please. I simply don't want to just enter polemics. I simply want to react to those worries. It's not only in NGO sector. We have it, of course, and now we witness this in governmental structures. And if someone doesn't know about the action plan, it's very, just a sad fact. The plan exists, and you can simply easily just ask for it. You simply should know the formalities of how to request public information. So every year we have just summarizing forum of NGOs, and by the way, our ministry is one of the facilitators of this forum, and please participate in this forum because it's a very, very just helpful tool for us to consider these strategically important documents with the MPO. And again, just let me just thank you for the invitation and wish NGO just big success. I also worked in this sector, and I'm your supporter. And based on my observation, and not only my observation, so who sleeps, it's very easy to wake up him or her. But who pretends to be sleeping, we can't wake him up. And I think our establishments, a lot of very just frequently, just pretend to be sleeping. Of course, we understand that government doesn't always have all the resources to create a good future. I'm not arguing, but in order to support us with small financial funds, I think they have these resources. At least, I think they're not supposed to issue so many just bonuses for their ministries. Thank you very much, everybody, just to be our guest today. So our time is over. We've got to wrap up, and I would like to ask every young people who watch our show, please to join at our just Facebook page. Let's continue our discussion together at Facebook page, and please write us. Any young people who is going to participate in our show. So, goodbye now.